Hello, emerging and evolving leaders. I'm Christine Rozier, host of the Irrelevant Leader podcast and founder of the Leadership Collaborative and Rozier Retreats. My platforms are dedicated to expanding the pool of exceptional leaders. I'm honored to be your leadership expert today. I believe that every person has the potential to become an extraordinary leader, and in doing so, significantly impact the lives of others. Extraordinary leadership begins with mindset. Relevant leaders are committed to developing the qualities necessary to successfully lead others, qualities that are cultivated and refined over time. Throughout the Irrelevant Leader podcast series, some of the world's most relevant leaders and I examine the behaviors and characteristics of irrelevant leaders. Tune in as we dig deep into identifying what goes wrong when a leader moves down the path from powerful leadership to ineffectual leadership. Join me for live call-in sessions, one-on-one interviews, and thought leadership segments as high-profile leaders and I explore what it takes for you to avoid the blight of dreaded irrelevancy and outline how you can achieve and maintain your place among the world's most profound and relevant leaders. Thank you again for listening. Let's get to today's episode. I am thrilled and honored to have as my special guest today, Laura Neal. Laura spent over 30 years in corporate America in roles ranging from quota-busting global sales rep to executive leadership. She spent the last 17 years of her corporate career at Cisco Systems and finished out her tenure in key leadership positions for global sales development and customer experience. While at Cisco, Laura coached individuals and teams internationally around the value of being authentic and conscious leaders. In 2017, she co-founded Assenter Coaching, an executive coach and ICF accredited coach training organization, providing coach and leadership training. She is an accomplished executive coach herself, a spiritual director, whose focus is on those who feel that they've lost their souls in their roles. Her scope of work ranges from training Cornell University HR how to be executive coaches, coaching CXOs and also priests in their roles as leaders, and delivering integrated in-house leadership programs to organizations. So let's get started. I've got a couple of questions I like to ask my guests. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you, Christine. Pleasure to be here.
We're so happy to have you. As a leader, what does relevance mean to you?
It's a great question. For me, I think being a relevant leader, I think relevance means the ability to adapt and evolve. So, as a leader, when we get stuck in, well, we always did it this way, um, and we become irrelevant. And so, I love the name of your podcast. I think it's totally relevant. And I think, traditionally we've looked at traits and talents as the check boxes for leaders. And we have not looked at our personal, who we are personally, our personal triggers as leaders. And we just kind of fit ourselves in a box um, and continue down that road.
Thank you. I love that. It makes me think about how we do tend to assume a role or get promoted into a role and believe that we've now arrived. This is something I went through in my own experience as a leader. I thought I had arrived. And the environment quickly told me that I hadn't, that it was necessary to continue to evolve and develop myself. And I love what you said about triggers because I think it's so important to understand where we get triggered, how we get triggered, why we get triggered as a way to begin to work with those energies and those experiences so that we can have the opportunity to change them. So thank you. What are some of the ways that you yourself practice uh, remaining relevant?
Well, I wish there was a one and done. I wish there was a magic bullet. And I think because it's a journey and there you never reach the final destination when it comes to self-awareness. It's why a lot of people don't do it. It's one of the hardest things that I've ever done is what I like to say is practicing, and it's really around self-awareness. I lean in a lot with mindfulness attitudes with my executive clients, and it was something that really spoke to me when I first got my own coach as an executive because I was stuck. And there's a beautiful story that John Kabat-Zinn, who's kind of the father of mindfulness, talks about. And the key to, I think, the key to stepping down the journey is first we have to be self-aware. And once we become self-aware of what our triggers are, then we have to let go. And that's where the fear comes in. And John Kabat-Zinn tells a beautiful story about in India, they tie a coconut with a hole in it to the base of the tree, and they put a banana inside the coconut. And the monkey will come up and reach its hand into the coconut and grab the banana. And even at risk of being captured, will not let go of the banana. And I find it such a beautiful metaphor for as leaders how we get stuck. We get stuck holding on and grasping something that maybe has served us in the past and no longer is, but we don't know how to let go. So to me, letting go is is the key. But if we're not self-aware, we don't know what to let go of.
Yes, exactly. There was a study done by a psychologist, and she polled, I don't recall the number of people, quite a number of people, on whether or not they thought they were self-aware, and 92% of them felt like they were self-aware. When she actually did the
Mm.
study, she found that only 12 to 15% were actually self-aware, which is interesting because how do you know you're not self-aware if you think you're self-aware?
Yeah,
And I believe that it takes this willingness, as you said, and the letting go of who we think we are or who we think we ought to be to begin to discover who we actually are and how we show up.
yeah,
And when you
yeah.
excuse me.
I was just gonna say, Christine, it's it's one of those things where uh, I saw a quote on I think it was on Facebook just yesterday. And it was a Dr. Seuss quote about, something along the lines of there's no other you than you, and you are the only you that there is, right? And but yet there's so much wisdom in that because we are each created so uniquely and we have our individual talents, we have our unique gifts, we have our own personal values that we live by, and yet we spend so much time as leaders trying to fit in. Um, and we spend so much time as people. I know myself personally, you know, um, we cling to the story that we think we want to control the narrative. We want to control the story. We want to be right because then people will respect. Then we'll have the respect that people that we deserve. And at the end of the day, I just there's this yearning from me and one of the reasons I became a leadership coach to just lean into our uniqueness and to let go of trying to fit in and to really stand up as ourselves. Because if we all didn't fit in, then we'd all sit in.
Perfect. Perfect. Yes. I hear this term mindfulness more and more in leadership conversations. And with my own clients, they are still struggling as to what that actually means.
Mm.
So, can you talk a little bit about what mindfulness means to you?
Yeah, it's a great question. We Mindfulness is simply being present to the present moment without judgment on purpose. So it's just being here now on purpose without judgment. And the without judgment is the key because we live so much in either the past or the future. We go in the shower and how many people are in the shower with us, right? Because we can't remember if we washed our hair or not because we're not present. So it's just being here now on purpose without judgment. And so that's one of the reasons mindfulness is different than meditation because meditation is while they're closely related, mindfulness is something that you can do any minute, anywhere, in a meeting, in the moment, anytime, and nobody knows but you. So to be self-aware, we have to first be aware. And to be aware, we have to be present.
Yeah.
And to be present, we have to be out of the story in our head and really be looking at what and paying attention to what's actually unfolding in front of us right now.
Yes. And when you mention without judgment, I
Mhm.
think that is extremely necessary and key, and perhaps maybe one of the obstacles in developing leadership qualities, or can be an obstacle because we all have bias, we all have preference. And to be able to show up in a way that is without judgment and open to whatever is present before us, whatever attitudes, whatever beliefs, whatever practices, is extraordinarily important in becoming a relevant leader.
Yes.
And I think it's one of the things that um, will I think it's one of the ways that leaders become irrelevant is that they allow those biases and preferences to stand in the way and they turn into judgments. And I
Yes.
can't lead others if I have judgment against them. Great point. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah.
If you were going to choose 3 of the top characteristics that you believe are important related to relevant leaders, what would those be?
Um, well, I think the first one is self-awareness. um, looking within constantly. And this is really hard work. This is exhausting work sometimes. It's not always pretty to be authentic, which would be my second one. Authenticity, we spend our whole lives trying to fit in with society and that's why many people find themselves I found myself in a career where I had to walk away. I begged them to give me a package, catch me up in a ref, please, all of those things, and they wouldn't do it. And my journey was just I had to walk away because I was to a point where I was felt caged. I felt trapped. I felt like I was miserable and I didn't know why. And so I think being when you are unable to be authentic, um, it's like there's a part of you that's just muffled. And we can't always put our fingers on why. And so we point outwards to, well, my boss did this, or the system is messed up, or my team isn't pulling their weight, or I've got, my partner's nagging me, or whatever it is. But we always point outwards. And so self-awareness is around, yes, those things are happening. And what is it bringing up in me? Why is this bothering me so much? And why am I holding on to it? So I think self-awareness and authenticity. Why am I pretending? What am I pretending not to know? Why am I pretending to be somebody? Why didn't I stand up for myself in that meeting? Why didn't I speak up? Why didn't I speak my truth? Why didn't I, just again, that self-awareness leads into being aware that you didn't step into your authenticity and why. Because when we're authentic, even with emotions, emotional intelligence is a big key to this too, I think, because if we're authentic and we can come into a meeting, whether it's our team, our peers, our bosses, our chain of command, and we can say what's true for us, whether it's I'm struggling today because I had to put my dog down last night, whatever our real life is happening, that connects people to you. People resonate with that. They resonate with your heart. They don't resonate with your brain. We're not brain connected, we're heart connected. So when we're authentic, people know that. They know when we're being authentic and they know when we're being real. And so that really requires being open, which is a scary place for many leaders to be. And then I would say the third one is just gratitude. If we can look at everything that's handed to us, not through rose-colored glasses, because then we don't see the red flags, right? But if we can look at everything and see the gift in it, even if the gift in the pain is a learning, because we learn from everything if we allow ourselves to. So everything is, if we're really paying attention when things don't go our way, when things hurt, when people hurt us or things hurt us, life happens. It's not, it's not a bouquet of flowers. So, um, what can we learn from that? That's self-awareness. What is in this for me? Thank you, because what is in this for me that I can learn? And how many times has something bad happened to us, Christine, where we've looked back and been like, we were rolling on the floor in the fetal position when it was happening. And then we look back and go, oh, thank God that happened.
So true. So true. Yes. Thank you. And there have actually been fetal position moments.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
I love
But
what you're I'm sorry.
I was just going to say one of my fetal position moments was I was working at Cisco and I had a manager, a person I reported to who was VP, and she was just working me to death. I mean, I was just, the more I did, the more she asked of me. And she never, ever, ever told me I was good, doing a good job. She never gave me any positive reinforcement. She never gave me anything negative. So that was her way. Giving me more work was her way of rewarding me. But I couldn't see that then. All I saw was, I had many words for her. And I was in California and I had to be there over the weekend because I was holding a couple of events back to back. And I just remember being on the phone with my husband in the elevator and I just broke down and I just started sobbing. He couldn't even understand what I was saying. And I just got to the point of saying, something's got to give. It's either her or me, and that was really a turning point for me in my corporate career where I recognized I couldn't keep going. I couldn't I couldn't keep working. I couldn't work any harder. I couldn't do any more. And I had to look inwards at that point because I wasn't going to change the people around me. I had to change myself. And a wise person says it's different because you're different. So once I made that conscious shift, even though it was still a lot of pain, that's when things started shifting. And then I realized, oh, I don't have to stay here. I can move positions. I can do this. I can do that. And it was little baby things. Um, and I can challenge the stories that I'm making up about the situation and about this particular person. So anyway, that was my fetal position story that kind of broke me open to start on this path.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Thank you. And I love the 3 characteristics that you pointed out. I'm gonna hone in for a moment on authenticity because, as you know, that's been part of my journey these last many years, several years. And I too was in the corporate world, and looking back, reflecting back, I now call myself the cardboard person because there was nothing behind the title and the role and the that was all there was. And I
Mhm.
had really no idea who I was. I thought, okay, just follow the rules, get into the corporate world, climb the ladder. I once heard it said, you climb the ladder to success only to realize the ladder's up against the wrong wall.
Mm,
Excuse me. And that was my experience. And so the journey into authenticity has been interesting, exciting, terrifying, and uh, really a way to introduce myself to myself, if you will, which leads me to what I'm doing today. Because as you mentioned earlier, the fear the fear that I chose to embrace and move into what gave me joy, what gave me peace, what gave me happiness, that fear was not small, and it wasn't, a one-time fear. It's been ongoing fear that I think as leaders, we have the opportunity every day to walk through it or, reflecting back on what you said earlier, or just to stay stuck like the poor monkey.
yeah.
We have those choices.
Yeah. And I think fear is what keeps irrelevant leaders irrelevant. Um be, and the fear can be is as vast as there are people. And in my second career of coaching executives, that's what I see is the fear comes in many different flavors as there are people. And so and how often do leaders sit with their fear and actually not only sit with it, but unpack it? What's real and what have I made up? And so what? And what if it does happen? And so Tim Ferriss has a great exercise called the freedom to fear. And it's really just an exercise of going there, sitting there. What are you afraid of doing? What if I X? And then just going there, to being homeless, living under a bridge. I mean, you and I both thought that, that coming from that place of scarcity.
Yes.
Um, and I think scarcity is another thing that we don't talk about enough uh, in the organizational system because there is enough. And it can be not only scarcity of money, but it's scarcity of approval, scarcity of love, scarcity of being enough. So my fear was always about, am I enough? My fear was always around proving that I was enough. And so I was committed to being right to prove that I was enough.
Sure.
And when somebody came up against me and hurt me or said something, I would hold on to that bloody, hurtful, painful thing. And I would carry it around and I would show it and tell every single person. I'd call people up to tell them about it, right? You wouldn't believe what she did this time, right? And keep it alive and keep it alive and keep this painful thing alive. And it's like, why are we holding on to this pain and then telling everybody what somebody did to us, this painful thing? Just let it go.
Yes.
Let it go. And that's why the letting go to me um, is such a vital part of the beginning of the journey. But we have to be aware that we're holding on.
Yes.
We have to be aware that we're in danger, and we just have to let go. Um, And it affects the whole system. We've all had bosses that have been fear mongers and ruled by fear and the theory that fear gets people to do things. Fear gets people to do things. Fear is not leadership.
Right.
People follow. To be a leader, it's about having people follow you, and people follow you because they trust you. People follow you because they buy in to you as an individual, as a human being. And that, again, has nothing to do with reaching our goals. It has to do with your soul and connection at a human to human level. And we're so afraid of that.
Yes, we are. I heard something the other day that I just love. And this person said, fear is afraid of fear.
Mm,
And when I hear you say, well, if we could learn to sit in it,
yeah.
that's the secret. It reminds me of a Rumi quote. One of my favorite is the cure for pain is in the pain.
Yeah.
And I think of the same thing related to fear, that fear is afraid to feel the fear.
Yeah.
And so if we could, as you said, begin unpacking, what is it that I'm really afraid of? I'm afraid of that feeling of fear.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to do all these things to try to avoid the feeling of fear rather than, I may not particularly like the feeling of fear, but I'm willing to embrace the feeling of fear. And
Yes.
then it gets a lot smaller and more manageable
Yeah.
than when we're pushing away from it and running away from it. So, very, very important. And for me, I experience the same thing with my clients, that the foundation of all these behaviors that prevent them from being extraordinary leaders, all these beliefs, behaviors, characteristics, whatever we might call them, the foundation of all of it is really fear. And
Yes.
yet, as you said, it's not something we talk about because we're all supposed to be fearless. And I
Right.
never met a human being that's actually fearless. Maybe fear less, but not fearless.
Right.
I'd like to
Exactly.
fear less tomorrow than I'm fearing today,
Right.
but I've never met anyone that's fearless. So those are very important characteristics in remaining relevant.
Yeah.
What are some of your own personal internal struggles as a leader?
Um, well, I think, part of my own internal struggle was, as I just described, the clinging, the fear. Honestly, I can say that at this point in my journey, I know without a doubt that I can point everything in my journey leading up to this point stems from one fear,
Mm.
and that is the fear of not being accepted, the fear of not being loved, the fear of people not liking me. What are people going to think? Is basically where my default went to.
Mm.
And, as I said earlier in coaching executives, everybody's fear manifests is as individual as the leader. So that's why there's no, secret pill that we can say, go do this and you'll be a relevant leader. Um, and once I made that connection, then it really it came it shifted the way that I showed up because I could catch myself doing things or thinking I should do something. Um, and then when I asked myself, why are you doing this? Is this really yours to do?
Mm.
Many times the answer was no. But it was this default behavior of, I had to be the hostess with the mostest. I had to be the cheerleader. I had to be this. I had to be that. I had to be the other thing. I had to get the most done at work. And one lesson that came to me in life as a leader was my boss. told me in one of our one-on-ones that my team was afraid of me.
Mm.
And I was like, it crushed me. It crushed me. And he said, because you don't, because you're such a striver, because you're such a get it done. And I'm also a direct person. So it's like, okay, I get on the calls, my team calls. I'd be like, okay, here's the agenda. Boom, boom, boom. Next, next, next. Sound familiar?
Yes.
Right. And I was rewarded for that
Yeah.
from the system. The
Yes.
organizational system loved that. My team, not so much because they just felt like a pawn. They just felt like a cog in the wheel. And so that really was a blow to me around how I was showing who that I was caring so much about what my higher ups thought of me that I was forgetting about not just what my team thought of me, but again, being a lead. What is a leader? A leader is not just getting people to do what's on your to-do list, right? And so that took a lot of work because I really had to shift the way that the story I was telling myself about how much time that was going to take, and we don't have time for that, and all of that, squishy stuff, and then somebody taught me the very simple 1 through 10 check-in with my team, and I started doing that before every meeting. I asked my team to go around on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being I couldn't be any worse, 10 being I couldn't be any better. Where are you on the scale? And if you feel concisely that you'd like to share why, please do. And it took a couple of minutes. And if somebody was under a 7, I might check in. And what it did was a couple of things. Number one, it made my team feel heard,
Yes.
even though it took only a couple of seconds. And number two, if there was something going on for them, if their dog did die the day before, and I was going to talk to Bob about his performance that day, or give him feedback that was, have a critical conversation with him. And he was a 3 because his dog died the day before. Then that gives me information as a leader that maybe Bob's not open to this feedback right now.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Right. And so it was really an aha moment for me in leadership because I realized the importance of feeling heard. And I realized the importance that it's not that we all have that we're all unique individuals. And just because I like to get on, I don't need that. I don't necessarily need that in a meeting. I'm happy to just get my marching orders, give you my report, and go do my work. And not everybody's like
Yes.
so I don't know if I answered the question, but I think that was when that came up for me around the fear, my understanding my own fear, and then how that was impacting my leadership.
Yes, perfect. That you answered it perfectly, and it reminds me of myself, of course. And as certainly as a new leader, and I experience this with my clients. As a new leader, I didn't truly embrace the reality that my role was to lead my team.
Yeah. Right.
I, as you said, thought that my role was to impress those who could promote me or give
Mhm.
me more money. And I remember, my team would stop by my office, and I'm embarrassed to say that I wouldn't even look up from the keyboard. I'd just be typing away tasks, whatever I needed to do, whatever I thought I needed to do. And the message to them was, "You're not important." And that's what they felt like, that they were not important. And I don't even recall the moment that I began to see that, you know, how I felt as an employee when I was related to that way, when the message coming to me that I was not important, how that
Right.
impacted me. And I'm grateful there was something that made me aware of that so that I could shift that. But I see that also with my clients, that they're not necessarily, especially the new leaders, they're not embracing the magnitude and complexity of being a relevant leader.
Yeah.
And so many of them still think that they're in charge of tasks rather
Yes.
than in charge of developing themselves so that people want to follow them. Very, very different.
Yes. Absolutely.
Very different. Uh, we can't really talk about being a relevant leader without talking about the great resignation. So, what are
Mm.
some of your thoughts about the causes of the great resignation?
Well, I'm gonna lean into my first um reaction, and that is I think it's fantastic because and I know that a lot of leaders are probably cringing because I get it, and I know, and I see it with my clients all the time that it's really forcing them to look at the way that we are, um the organizational system functions. And as you said in my bio, in my intro, that I was a leader in the organizational system. I now coach people in the organizational system, and that includes priests um, in the organizational system. And I have a business partner. We're an organizational system. So whenever there's more than just you, there's an organizational system,
Yes.
right? And I think while it creates this short term stress for leaders today, I think it's really important for the overall evolution and adapting. Like we said earlier, what is relevance? It's being able to evolve and adapt to the needs. And I think part of the and um, when I was at your retreat, Rosa retreats, you shared a a statistic that really stuck with me, and that was around employee engagement, and saying that year after year after year after year, it's been at about 30% employee engagement. And yet, when they did the same poll over the pandemic, it was 33%.
Yes.
And so when I think about that, that's really stunning to go up 10%. Well, it's not great still. It still means that, a large portion of people, and 10% is a huge jump over the course of a year or two. And when I think about what the causes might be for the improvement in employee engagement, I think it has to do with just the newer generation of people. We saw over the pandemic, even traditional, I'll say, leaders that have been in the system for a while, um, really struggling with that authenticity.
Yes.
Right? We heard stories about people, like people who had a boss who never knew that they had kids
Yes.
until they were working from home. People who had, and then there's a guy who's working from his car because he doesn't want anybody to know that he has, what his home life is. So, no, he doesn't want anybody to see his house, right? And so, but all of a sudden, we're looking at people's houses. We're hearing the dog bark. We're hearing the house, the phone ring. We're hearing, we're hearing life.
Yes.
And all of a sudden, we're seeing people in a different way. And so, I think that there's, you and I have talked about this in the past about energetic reciprocity. Money is just one piece of the puzzle. And with the newer generation coming in, they are they work differently. They think differently. They're more autonomous. They're more they lean they're what's important to them is not just working for 20 years, getting the gold ring and the retirement package, and then enjoying their life,
Yes.
which is when I was growing up, that's what it was all about, right? And so I think that there's this real and again, when you go back to authenticity and trust in the workplace, um, with the pandemic, we were organizations were forced to trust their employees.
Yes.
And so to have people now say, "Oh, you have to come back to work," it's a game. It's a showstopper for some people.
Mm.
They're like, "No," and so the money piece is just one piece of it. It's a quality of life, and I don't like to use the term work life balance because it's all life.
Yes.
If
Yes, it
you're
is.
if your work is if you're having a bad day at work, you're bringing it home, and if you're having a bad day at home, you bring it to work. It's just we're human beings. And so I really think that that is part of um the cause of what we're seeing is, and I also think that the younger generation has different fears than we do. um that the fears that we have, um a lot of them don't have those fears. They have different fears, but it's not, how am I going to survive?
Yes. Yes, and we have talked about this. Thank you. We've talked about this, and through my lens, I see this deconstructing happening of the way it once was, and
Yes.
what I see is anytime there's a chaotic, if you will, environment, there's such opportunity for innovation and creativity and throwing all the parts. I had a dream last night. Just throw all the parts on the table and just start picking and choosing how to put them together, how to assemble that puzzle in a way it's never been assembled before. And that gets me really excited because I think, again, there's so much opportunity to do that now and to let go of what once was simply because it was, not because it actually worked
Yes.
and allow us as leaders and organizations to begin to see through a different lens or to become willing to see through a different lens. And I love that the workforce is actually forcing that because I don't know that we would have done that without that.
It's an organizational culture issue, right? And that starts with individuals.
Yes.
I mean, how many of us have worked for an organization where our values were aligned with the organization's values, but and then we work for a person and we're miserable
Yes.
because they're not walking the talk. And so it's all about integrity. And to me, integrity is, I mean, it's the same root as integration.
Yes.
We as humans have to be fully human. We have to be integrated. Mind, body, emotion, spirit, all four cylinders must be firing equally on all cylinders for us to be whole. And that's how we need to show up. And that's what I mean by authenticity. And so these new generations coming in, and now that I think the millennials are now moving up into management positions,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
so it's they have a lot less biases, um just culturally, in the way that they've been raised, in what's gone on in the world. They have a lot less prejudice and bias. I'm not saying it's gone. Um, I mean, just turn on the news. And I feel like as a whole, their culture is just the culture of those younger generations is different. The way that they hold each other and the way that they relate with each other. And I think that, again, that goes back to that authenticity.
Yes. Yes. I agree. So this has been fantastic, absolutely fantastic.
Thank you.
And I so appreciate your time and your wisdom and your experience. What final thoughts or practice would you leave for the audience that they could go out and implement today?
Um, well, the first thing I would just offer is the 1 through 10. Try it. Try it with your spouse, your partner, your friends. Imagine, just every interaction, just instead of how are you, fine, and taking it at face value, actually giving a range and exploring if they're under a 7, what's happening for you. I mean, that just in and of itself just meets each other in a very quick way. The other thing that there's two I would say tools. One is mindfulness. So John Kabat-Zinn, molecular biologist, PhD from MIT, he if you Google him, and we can put it in the show notes, however you're letting your guests know about the resources. You know, in coaching, we like to say you need to do the work to do the work.
Yes.
And so to be a leader and to be self-aware, we need to do our own work first. The way that I use mindfulness attitudes, there's 7 of them. Everything from what we talked about, letting go, to acceptance, to patience, to trust, to non-striving,
Yes.
to beginner's mind, which is curiosity. I just ask there's a 1-pager. I just ask my clients in the morning when they're in the bathroom to leave it in their bathroom and take a peek at it and pick one. Just pick one mindfulness attitude and try and see the world that day through that lens. You can pick the one that comes easiest to you. You can pick the one that comes hardest to you. You can pick anyone that just speaks to you. That seems to really work for my clients because, again, it's something that they can, in the moment, when they're going to feel themselves getting, the flush, the heart racing, the blood flowing, they can take a breath and just go, what does this look like through the eyes of trust? What does this look like through the eyes of letting go? What does this look like through the eyes of patience? And just checking in with yourself. That one seems to really resonate because, again, it doesn't take extra time to, now you got to go journal.
Sure.
I mean, journaling's great and I'm a big proponent. And then I would also throw in there the 15 commitments of conscious leadership. There's a 1-pager, and really the premise is very straightforward. It's a single line. If you're below the line, which is what we were talking about earlier
Yes.
in our struggles,
Yes.
we were committed to being right.
Yes.
We were defensive and we were closed.
Yes.
When you're above the line, you're open, you're curious, and you're committed to learning. And just that simple, basic concept, again, can be done in the moment when you feel yourself defending, getting defensive, getting closed, being committed to being right, in your head about what you're going to say before the other person, trying to listen to respond instead of understand. It's a fantastic book. It has the website has a lot of resources, but just that one basic concept of what is learning here? If I'm open and curious and committed to learning, what can I learn from this person's perspective that's so different from mine? Mark Nepo, who is a poet and writer, tells a story about, he asks people, tell me about your experience, not your conclusion.
Fabulous.
Because that's where we meet each other on a human level. That's where we find common ground. Even though you might land with a different belief or a different side of the situation than I do.
Yes.
That's not what's important. What's important is finding common ground, and that's in our human experiences.
Fabulous. Thank you again. And thank you for being an extraordinary and very, very relevant leader.
Thank you, Christine.
That's a wrap. Thank you for joining me, Christine Rozier, and the Irrelevant Leader podcast series. Remember this: you are more extraordinary and capable than you think. To become the leader you aspire to be, you need the right tools and support to assist you in developing and maintaining the characteristics found in great and relevant leaders. That's why I host the Irrelevant Leader podcast, direct the year-long leadership collaborative, and Rozier Leadership Retreats. Visit the website at christinerozier.com That's spelled Rosier, to learn more. Check out the podcast page for upcoming live events and interviews with amazing, relevant leaders. If you're not already on the mailing list, then please sign up to join me and this powerful network of exceptional leaders.